Hi everyone. Uh, for my album critique, I decided to choose Johnny's Greatest Hits by Johnny Mathis. Um, this is a really this is one of my favorite albums, so I decided to share it with y'all. Um, I really like it because it's a bit of a romance album, so it's really great if you're just looking to relax. Maybe have a quiet dinner at home with your significant other. Um, it's one of these albums that you can just listen from beginning to end, and like there's really no songs that you feel like you need to skip. It was really well produced from beginning to end, and it's one of the reasons why I really enjoy it. So the album credits. So like I said, it was recorded by Johnny Mathis on Columbia Records, and it was released March 17th, 1958, and produced by Mitch Miller and Al Hamm. Uh, each song was recorded at CBS's 30th Street studio up in New York. Um, there are a lot of composers on this album. Pretty much every song has at least two, or it looks like two. Um, so I can't go ahead and read them all because that'll take forever. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of a lot of work put into the composition of this album, which makes it that much uh that much greater. Uh, so the musicians, in true Johnny Mathis style, the album was recorded with orchestras, and something that I found interesting was that despite this being an orchestra, in most of the songs you can clearly hear classical guitars being played as well, um, which is not something you see a lot of. So I just thought that was really cool. Um, So the two orchestras that he used on this album was the Ray Conniff Orchestra and the Ray Ellis Orchestra, and both songs had at least one notable song. Um, for instance, Ray Conniff had "Wonderful, Wonderful" and "It's Not for Me to Say," while Ray Ellis had "12th of Never." Um, so each orchestra was beautifully recorded, captures all of the little nuances that make each song special. So uh, I could only imagine being in the room when these orchestras were being recorded. I'm sure that must have been just an incredible sound. So the song examination. This was probably the hardest part of the project for me, mainly because the music is orchestral, jazz esque. So some of the songs don't follow the typical structure that we're used to, where it's like intro, verse, verse, chorus, verse, outro. Um, they kind of blur the lines as to what is a verse, what is a bridge, what is a chorus. Um, so despite all my years in band, I had to do a little bit of research and get a better understanding of the typical definitions of what is a verse versus what is a chorus. Because I wanted to make sure that I was categorizing everything correctly. Um, and even doing that additional bit of research, it was still kind of iffy at times. Um, if you look at songs like "Chances Are," for instance, after the internet after the instrumental section, there's a bridge refrain, and basically the refrain is just a like one or two line repetition of the last part of the bridge. Um, so it's not the full version of the bridge; it's just maybe like the last line or two. So I stuck that in there to kind of help clarify some things. Um, but yeah, some of these songs follow patterns of their own. Like when Sunny Gets Blue, it's just intro and then like four verses. Um, and then when we go to like the other outside of the album, if you look at No Love, we get like this really funky structure where it's like intro, four choruses. We have two alternative choruses, um, and I wrote that these are alternate choruses because the first four and the last three are really similar. There's a little bit of changes, but for these other two, they really stand out. But I still feel like they categorize themselves as a chorus. Um, but pretty much all the songs have an instrumental section as well, which I feel like is really nice. Um, I think it just allows you to kind of just bask in the song a little bit longer than some of the other ones. So I really like that touch that they always have some sort of instrumental section for most of these songs. Um, so the acceptance of this album. So I just want to state that some of the dates that I'll be presenting you with uh, occur before the release of this album, and that's because it's a greatest hits album. So a lot of the or all the songs on this album have been released prior to the album release. Uh, so for this album, for 1958, it was ranked the eighth, the number eight album, and then for all of 1950s, it was ranked number 21, and the album beat out other artists such as Elvis, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Miles Davis, and these were like top brass musicians of their time. Um, so the fact that Johnny Mathis was beating out these headlining artists only 2 years into his contract with Columbia, I think says a lot for his career. Um, the album reached number one for 3 weeks in June of 1958, and then it was certified gold by RIAA in June of 59, and then it went platinum, or three times platinum, in November of 99. I should also mention that this was the longest running album on the Billboard 200 albums chart uh, for like 11 years until it was replaced by the first longest, um, which I believe by Nirvana. um, so two of the songs on this album won Grammy Hall of Fame awards. Uh, and they are Chances Are and It's Not For Me to Say, and they respectively won in 98 and 2008. For international charts, Wonderful Wonderful reached number one in Australia in September 57, and the year before it also won the ASCAP Song of the Year. And then back in Australia for number one, we had 12th of November from March of 58. And then two of the songs on this album, Wild as the Wind and A Certain Smile, were both nominated for Oscars um, for the title track movie that they were in. I'd also like to mention that the song It's Not For Me to Say has also been featured in movies like Lizzie in 1957, Goodfellas in 1990, and Zodiac in 2007. So a lot of Johnny Mathis's music has been in film in one way or another, whether directly or indirectly. So industry game changer. So this is the first greatest hits album ever released. Uh, it really wasn't a greatest hits album. Uh, Ironically, when it was released, Johnny Mathis didn't have any hits yet by this point. This was mainly just a stunt by his producer to help kind of cushion themselves financially while Johnny Mathis was going to be touring in Europe. Um, and it actually ended up becoming a really popular album. Um, and not only that, but it also became a popular format uh, and countless musicians now, uh, to this date, have released greatest hits albums. Some of them have released more than one greatest hits album, like Elvis Presley. He's unfortunately been dead for quite a while, but yet he still has multiple releases of greatest hits albums by the right holders. Uh, so only the best sound possible. If you listen to this album, which I highly recommend you do, uh, the you'll just hear from the beginning the orchestra is just absolutely crystal clear. Um, you don't really get a sense that this album was late 1950s. It almost sounds like the quality of something you'd almost hear today. And the reason being is that the studio that CBS owned, uh, so it was a church, and then they purchased it or rented it, I guess, and completely outfitted it with the best gear possible. I mean, they went and they sound treated everything with tapestry, mostly tapestries, so that way it could be modulated. If they needed more dampening, you just undo the curtains, and if you wanted a more lively sound, you could just tie back the curtains and expose more of the brick wall. But as far as the gear goes, CBS was using some of Neumann's most popular microphones, the M49, the M50, and the U47. They had Ampex tape machines. Uh, the monitors in the live room were Altec theater monitors, which seems to be pretty common for that day and age for studios to use theater monitors. And then at one point when they were first getting set up, Steinway brought over four grand pianos, and they had one of their composers sit at the piano and test each one to get an idea of which one he liked the best. Um, so I think that just goes to show how much time and effort CBS put into building out the studio. Um, and like I said, it was built in a church, so space was not an issue. Uh, they were recording these really large orchestras, and while I do imagine there is bleed in from mic to mic, it's not the type of bleed where it makes the album very muddy or very washed out. Uh, Everything can be heard very distinctly, and you get this really clear and crystal sound. Um, the engineers were really on their game when they did this album, and not only that, like countless other great recordings were done at the studio too. Miles Davis's "Kind of Blue" and Frank Sinatra's "New York, New York." So you can't really consider this just a one-off. This really was done intentionally, and the product is just phenomenal. So these are my sources. If you have any questions about the presentation or about the album itself, um, feel free to drop your questions in the comments and I'll get to them when I can. Hope you all have a great finals and even better holiday break.